Hey, it's Carlie.
Hey, it's Shamina. And
We're emotional.
oh, I was waiting. Let's beat me to it. All right. Before we get to our regular scheduled programmed event, we want to thank our patrons from Patreon: Joanne Stewart, Kevin Gallagher, Therese Gallagher. I want to say your brother's name every single time.
Why are you thinking about my brother like that?
Because they just
watch out, Stacy.
So similar. Stacy, you're good. He's your baby daddy.
True.
Okay, so I am so excited for this episode because we have two guests, not one, but two guests today. So let's introduce them. Don't bring them in. Let's introduce them.
I didn't. I'm waiting for you to do the honors.
All right. So our first guest, I'm reading their bios in first person language. So this is not me speaking. All right. First one. My name is Emily Tripp, and I'm a lover. Yes, that's actually her last name. And I'm a lover of all things nature, arts, and music. I enjoy helping people connect with the emotions they move aside while redirecting the thoughts that keep them stuck. Say that 5 times fast. I'm an animal lover and advocate. I might have played too much Skyrim and Mario over my lifetime. I'm happily married and have been with my husband for 12 years and have a 1-year-old sassy baby girl. That is our guest number 1, Emily. Guest number 2. Hi, my name is Jessica, and I'm a clinical professional counselor intern. That's a mouthful. With the state of Nevada. My passion is working with children and young adults. I also enjoy working with parents or guardians on how best to support their children through challenging times and how to implement healthy and helpful behavior management and positive discipline strategies. Can you tell that these people are both therapists, friends? Can you tell?
Yes.
On my days off, I enjoy cooking, spending time with my fur children, and hiking. So without further ado, let's get emotionful. And
drum roll.
Bring them in, bring them in.
Bring them out, bring them out. It's not working.
Oh, we got somebody.
Oh,
we got Jessica. Hi. Hello.
We got a problem here. Oh, there we go.
We got Emily.
Hey, Jessica.
We got him. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Oh my God, we forgot to tell everybody what we're going to talk about, but we will do that since we are now on here. I don't think we've ever had 2 guests on before, so you both are the first.
Yay. Not via Zoom.
Yeah, not via Zoom.
I feel so honored.
Emily, can you hear us okay? She's
frozen.
I like those glasses, Jessica. Thank you.
Yeah, they're cute.
Emily, where are you?
Well, let's continue. Let's talk about what we're talking about today while she gets herself situated.
All right. Let me tell her that she's frozen.
Long time no see, Jessica. How's life?
A while. Good. Things are good.
Yeah. What do you got in that background? What is that? Is that
That's a gerbil.
a what?
My gerbil, Jim. He's the last one standing. We moved across the country with Jim and Dwight and Michael. And I mean, they don't live for very long. They only live for like 2-3 years in captivity, but Jim is the oldest one, and he's like 4 or 5 now, I want to say.
Wow.
All right, Emily, are you back? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I am. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Connection issues. Yay, technology.
You're good. So for our viewers today, as you can tell, we are overloaded with therapists today. Carlie is finally outnumbered with the therapists in the room. Fun fact, Jessica and Emily are my ride or die in graduate school. I don't think I would have survived if the two of you have not been my friend. We worked on group projects together. We did homework. We studied. We did it and graduated.
We did.
They did it.
Thank me for sitting next to you in that class. I didn't even know who you were.
Yes. She's like, you look nice. And I'm like, oh, people don't.
I didn't want to sit next to another individual. So I was like, oh, here we go, skirt. Let me just sit next to you.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. You need to go.
Yeah, that would be her sassy 1-year-old as
Yep. And my husband holding her over. So come on, go. I'm so sorry, you guys.
You're fine. So today I brought these two ladies on the podcast because I wanted their perspective on mental health in their own lives going through a pandemic, but also what they're seeing with their clients. Obviously, you guys hear a lot from me. In my perspective, Jessica works with kids and in a different state. So I'm super stoked to hear kind of her perspective on this. And Emily has worked in the substance use population during the pandemic and now is in private practice. So very different kind of mediums and modalities that she's doing. So we are having a mental health podcast today about the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yay!
We gonna get full of emotion today, baby.
Are you ready? So,
you ready?
Karlie, let me ask you this. Do you have any questions to begin with?
No, but I'm very curious, Emily, with working with substance use during the pandemic, how that was, because I feel like that probably did a lot of people relapse or like really struggle with that. I feel like that probably was like a common thing, no?
Yeah, that was definitely a challenging period of my life. Also getting into the licensed role, but absolutely, I was a clinical case manager at the time, so I had to help with enrolling people with intakes and just getting the information. But I saw, the facility itself saw a significant increase in individuals coming in from the pandemic. I think the thing that was probably the most concerning is that a majority of meetings and so sponsor availabilities, resources for people that require that in recovery, post rehabilitation, a lot of those things were shutting down. So people didn't have that resource or that toolkit that they were utilizing before. And with that, that's why they say, like, it really does, it takes a community. And so without that resource, especially with substance use, the likeliness of relapse is so high. And so that was definitely the case. It was really, it was an upsetting time. And then even then, the diversity of substances for a long time, it was predominantly, marijuana, cocaine, and some other things, but there was an increase in even other things like methamphetamine down in the area was on a drastic rise. I remember the last 2 years I was there, I saw more methamphetamine than I ever had in the other 2.5 years I was there. So a lot of street drugs. Yeah. So just things that are a lot more, easy, accessible to get your hands on. And I think even sadder in some ways is just, people's level of desperation and what that will get, if they don't even have the resource to talk to someone. It's like, what's going to continue to fill that void of emptiness, depression, anxiety. So yeah, definitely a lot of challenges there. And I think the thing that is the saddest when it comes to that is some of the highest deaths from that entire facility that they had seen in years within, very, very short periods of time. So that was very disheartening to see. Some really, really great clients that had years on their belts of recovery in some ways were like the poster child for, hey, look, see, this person can do it. You can do it. Really inspirational. And even they couldn't, maintain their recovery through the process. So it's been interesting. A lot of people focus on the increase in anxiety, depression, very common. And of course, I'm sure we'll be talking about this more through the pandemic. What people aren't talking about is the increase in obsessive compulsive disorder, especially contamination has drastically increased with people. Agoraphobia has increased. And then also, of course, the substance use has just increased through the roof. So that is definitely my experience on that. So, and I've also seen it in private practice too, but I think we're kind of at the tail end now. So
yeah, I don't think the world, and obviously we're never ready for like a global pandemic, but in mental health, I don't think anybody was prepared, like nobody even thought like, hey, let's offer online like AA or NA meetings, or even the agency that I was working at, we had no telehealth platform. Like that didn't even exist. And I feel like just in 3 to 4 months, once the shutdown happened, it was like, oh, now we need to do these things, now we need to implement like what's going to work. And most people like that now. And so I think, at least from my perspective, that was one of the really challenging things is, they didn't teach us how to do telehealth in graduate school. They didn't teach us how to connect with somebody via the internet. I think our generation and the generation that we are, that was like a really helpful thing because we grew up with technology. We're not in the older generation. So it's like, Blue, what are you doing?
She's being very needy right now. I apologize.
So I think that was like a huge thing, is like the technology piece. We were lacking that significantly. And so we saw all of this stuff because our clients, everybody dropped the ball. There was nothing for them to kind of grasp onto, especially with the substance use population.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Shamina. Just to piggyback on that, yeah, you're right. Talk about just that level of preparedness. Unfortunately, it's like the old joke on like, you see memes on Facebook, Instagram, and other things about like, oh, you don't really know about what really warrants a meeting until a pandemic happens. And I feel like the same thing actually happened. In some ways, it's been horrible, but in other ways, it's actually, to reframe it, has been good because it's opened up people that maybe were closed off, they're apprehensive before, of connecting via telehealth, via virtual. These are powerful alternatives to take advantage of. People with limited mobility, accessibility, again, to resources, transportation. It's just, I think another really powerful tool to do that. Like I've had clients exposed to, in the private practice portion, I've had people that have informed me that, hey, I can't make it to therapy today. I still do a lot of one-on-one. And then I say, well, that's fine. Thank you for letting me know that you've been exposed, or, you have COVID. I mean, how are you feeling? Checking in after that. And then from there, offering that alternative of, hey, do you want to do virtual? Do you want to do telehealth? Like, what do you prefer? And of course, based on the person's reaction, I'd say like 9 times out of 10 though, because I've had quite a few clients that have come, in contact or have actually had it. And 9 times out of 10 people are like, granted that feel fine. They're like, yeah, let me go ahead. Let me do virtual. Let me do telephone if they're having like connection issues like I was earlier. So yeah, so there we go. And that's what I've noticed. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Definitely an increase in recovery as well. Platforms, apps have increased with that. And then of course, the virtual too. So.
What were you gonna say, Jess?
I was just gonna say that it's a lot more convenient for people. I think especially, out here, I can tell the viewers, I live in Las Vegas. So outside of Las Vegas, there's like nothing unless you're driving a good 3 hours. We have like Boulder City and Mesquite and Pahrump that are an hour and a half, but they're like very, very rural towns. And so I see a family that I've only ever seen via telehealth, and they live like an hour away. So I think there's lots of negatives that come with it, especially when working with kids, but it is a very convenient method, I think. And I think it has brought a lot of people who wouldn't ordinarily go to therapy to therapy.
Yeah, because you both now are doing like a hybrid or either like all in the office, correct?
Yeah. When the new year started, we saw a big influx with the new variant, and our director shut down the office. Not like fully, like we could still see some clients, but she wanted us mainly to do telehealth. And so we're still kind of in that phase. I'm seeing some clients in office who just can't do telehealth or can't do regular therapy to begin with, let alone, sitting in front of their computer screen.
Yeah.
But it's, I'm doing since the new year, I'm doing telehealth more than I had been previously.
I didn't even think about it like that, Jessica, but I really do. I'm curious if with telehealth becoming an option, because I'm thinking back, I started going to therapy during the pandemic. And to be honest, like if I think about it, I feel like if telehealth wasn't an option, I don't know how likely it would have been that I think I might have gone, but how likely it would have been that I would have continued, because it's so convenient. Like I can literally do it on my lunch hour because I don't have to worry about driving and then driving back. Like I know I have that whole hour. I just go on my phone real quick or on my computer and I have it. And like, I don't know, I didn't even think about that, but like, yeah, it definitely has added like you said, of like, I think the likelihood of people maybe not going prior because that wasn't an option. Now maybe it is, and there's maybe more people seeking services.
It's convenient for families too, right? Like they don't have to get childcare. I have a lot of clients, I mean, in the Medicaid population, right, that don't have transportation. Like they just don't, and so they can still get the services that they need, right?
Yeah, and I saw that when I was in the agency, when I was working with kids before I left, was, you know, they grade us on, not grade us, but they deal with like productivity, like how many billable hours, what have you. And once we went telehealth, I feel like my no-show rate significantly went down. People canceling their appointments significantly went down because there's like no excuse, you know, like you got a phone? Does it have internet? Do you have Wi-Fi? Okay, then there's no reason that we can't do our session.
Right.
So for you, Jess, I'm kind of interested in some of the like patterns and trends that you've been noticing with the kiddos and the families since the pandemic has hit.
Well, so I can tell you that I started doing telehealth in March of, what was it, 2020? Is that when like everything shut down? Yeah. Okay. So I was still in Florida then. And then I moved across the country in the middle of the pandemic. I do not recommend starting a job in the middle of a pandemic. That was really awful. Just like not knowing anyone, right? And then like you weren't in the office to meet people. I'd say one of the biggest things that I saw when I first started here, like a year and a half ago, was the increase in like suicide rates. They were going down a bit, but now I'm seeing another influx in them. And I think I should preface that with the schools like shut down here last year. Like they did not go into school at all. They were strictly virtual, like distance learning, up until I want to say maybe 2 to 3 months until the end of the last school year. And they would do like a hybrid where they would go in like 2 days a week. But I know that was different in Florida, right? The schools opened up. Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe that was probably a big factor.
They offered like a virtual option. So it was like you could go in person or virtual. So you had the teachers doing both. Like they'd have Zoom on the screen and then they'd have kids in front of them.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, they shut down completely here. So I think that played a really big role in the suicide rates. And I'm not talking like teens. I'm talking like eight-year-olds would come into my office telling me that they wanted to kill themselves.
That's horrible.
Trigger warning potentially for, I guess I should have mentioned that in this episode talking about mental health and possible trigger warning. So be mindful of that throughout the podcast. If it ever gets too overwhelming, please stop and come revisit afterwards after doing some grounding techniques or coping skills. So what's the age range that you're most?
I would say I specialize in like 2 to 10, but I mean I see all ages. Yeah, I see teens, I see young adults. I like the littles though, like 10 below.
Yeah, and that's the hardest population to even do telehealth with because they're not engaged enough or have the attention span to sit there and do what you need to do for an hour.
Right, let alone my kiddos who have ADHD as well. It's a lot of redirection, a lot of prompting, a lot of, I call them wiggle breaks, right? Where I can notice that they're getting very fidgety and we'll take a minute just to wiggle around. It's a lot, it is. I don't prefer it, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and I think it's exhausting from a therapist perspective because it's such a lack of control over the environment. You know, I can remember there was this one client I had and he would just like do laps around the table that he was on. I was like, can you go get your mom? Because this is not working. And I would get so frustrated because I had to do this, you know, and this was my job. And I felt like I was failing my clients in that aspect because it was such a barrier to get them to engage, or, I could get 15 minutes and that
Right.
and I had to be okay with that and knowing that those 15 minutes kind of meant something.
Or just having them do it on their phone or their computer. Like they're just on other things too. They are
just constantly distracted.
It's hard. I mean, a lot of the times it's helpful to like bring the parents in or set some kind of ground rules beforehand. Like I've had them, like they need to stay in their seat, right, wherever they are. Some kids will just go outside though, like they don't have a private space in their home, right? So I've had my 10-year-old just go on their balcony, right, or outside somewhere so they can have some private time. I think that there was a big learning curve with telehealth and kids. I think there's definitely a lot still more that I can learn, but being very creative has come in handy. Yeah, like online Santray, that was amazing.
Cool.
Screen sharing is also very helpful. So I'll have like my kiddos who don't like to talk, I'll just have them screen share, right? And they'll be on like some website, like a drawing app or something, and they're just doodling right as we're talking together. Or I do a lot of like bibliotherapy, but I don't have the books with me, but they have read aloud books on YouTube. So I'll just share my screen and I can pause it as it's going along. I think a lot of doors have opened since the pandemic started, which has made it a lot easier, but it's still a challenge. I don't prefer it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the amount of resources, like once we finally hit like this is going to stay, then people got more invested of how can we make this better? How can we make this more accessible and effective?
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to show you guys the online Santray. It's free and it's amazing.
Yeah, for real. Send that our way for sure. I want to kind of get back to Jessica, what you had said earlier of, moving across the country in the middle of the pandemic and also kind of starting this new job, because Karlie and I were just talking about that on a couple episodes ago about how, just this past December, she had, what the heck was it? You had like those dinners with your coworkers, and because that was the first time that she actually met them in person. It wasn't just a name that she saw in an email or a face, and how like isolating that can probably be from a personal perspective, not necessarily a clinical one.
It was a lot. I think just learning a whole new platform, learning whole new rules, and not just with a different company, but a whole different state. It's way different here. And it was, I just felt very, I wouldn't say like isolated, just kind of lost most of the time, right? Like the questions that you would just go run into your supervisor's office for, I had to send an email for, right? So at the end of each day, I would have like long ass lists of questions that I had that I would send to her, right? She is very busy. And so sometimes my questions didn't get answered until like 2-3 days later, when at that point it was mute. It was, I wouldn't recommend it. It was hard. It was hard connecting with other people. I mean, we would do like Zoom, like staff meetings, so I could see everyone's face, right, and get to know them. But once we got back into the office, it really felt like home then. It was much better. I don't have any advice for anyone. I just don't do it if you can. I think now, where we're at now versus a year and a half ago, is better, right? But don't do it if you don't have to. I didn't have a choice.
I think starting off, it is very overwhelming, no matter like what you're doing, because Shamina knows, and I've said this before, literally like 2 days in, I was like, I'm quitting. I'm not doing this. This is so hard. But now, like, I love it. I love working from home, but I will say like starting a job in a pandemic, or at least an all remote job, and not having like the option of going in is very difficult, because I was going to quit within 2 days. And like you said, they, people try to reach out and they try to be as helpful, but when you don't have like that just ease of like, hey, you should just pop it in real quick, I have this quick question, asking it makes it a lot harder of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm kind of on a standstill right now until I can figure out this answer.
Right. A lot of learning as you go. Absolutely. And learning how to advocate for yourself. That was something that I had to learn, I think, when I started the position that I'm at now.
Yeah, I agree.
Like really like having to speak up and say these problems. I think advocating for myself is something that I learned quite
Mhm.
quickly. I'm proud. I mean, I'm happy of it, right? I'm happy that it happened that way. I think that's a big part of it too, right? Because no one's going to come in and be like, "Hey, do you need help with anything?" When you're sitting alone, right? You have to come and ask those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emily, you're licensed now, so nobody comes and checks on you about anything because you've got full liability, full responsibility. I think that was really challenging for me because I got licensed last January. And it was so anticlimactic, like we work our whole careers like to get licensed. And I remember the day and she was just like, "Congratulations, I got the email and here's your license number." And I was like, I spent like 4.5 years of my life just to get an email and that's it. And then you're all alone. And if we're in the middle of a pandemic, like I was working completely from home. And I think that also has like a different component to it because Jessica, you're still pursuing licensure. So you at least get a little more feedback or contact with like
a lot of supervision.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Emily, what has that been like for you since you got licensed?
Yeah, I was a couple months after, I think it was April. Yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah, it was April of, wow, already. My goodness, crazy. So I got licensed April last year and it was the same thing. Granted, I was still in the role as a clinical case manager, but I knew at that point, starting to kind of fish around and see. Of course, I give the option, but I realized there weren't any therapist positions where I was. So I decided to start looking, but it was interesting because I am at a different place now than I was when, like my stepping stone from, clinical case manager, licensed therapist. And that was a really great experience. I was there about 6 months, but I was hearing that similarly to other places, other private practices, that the growth was so stagnant, like there was really nothing. And I've heard that talk about all or nothing. I mean, I try to be middle. I think we all are, but I mean, there's some places that no growth, and there's other places you get in, and the clients are just like funneled your way. So I did notice that difference. It was a little overwhelming. Granted, over there, there was a lot more like hands-on, a lot more, I don't want to say micromanaging, but in some ways, yeah. So I mean, that was the case here, though. Where I am, there's a lot more kind of flexibility. We're here if you need us, but it's really up to you. But yeah, I mean, in some ways that can be, at times isolating, but I think it's also empowering as well, because like knowing that, that's the thing that's nice about, school. We connect with so many people, maintain your connection with colleagues and other things. So we can I just want to say I love the animals and everyone's stuff. It's really good. but I mean, talk about connections, connecting with animals, connecting with colleagues. I mean, it's all really great resources to have. To be fair though, I don't think it was super significant for me, because even before that, for like 4 years, I had the same like routine, same Monday through Friday thing. And it was less hours where I was before, and now it's a little bit more, but I'm kind of used to going to the office. So for me, I think that would be actually harder to have to just be at home, because that's one thing I work with my clients primarily right now, because a lot of them do work from home or have that capability. That's one thing I work with is like, the healthy boundaries within your household. Like, what's an area that you are able to separate with work? What's an area you are able to separate with personal? Because I hear clients that have trouble with, sleeping issues. That's everything I've seen a problem with, and an increase in with the pandemic. But like clients are like, I'm really having trouble sleeping. Well, how come? Well, that's where I do all my work. That's where I work. And it's like, well, you no longer have the association of sleep in your bedroom. You have the association of being wired, being waking up, like paying attention to things. So, and even like working the people of like, how do you separate that? So for me, I mean, talk about, obviously practicing what you preach, but I would have to find a room in my house that is appropriate for that. So power to you guys for working from home, because that requires a great deal of discipline. I've done some virtual sessions in my office, but Jess, I completely agree, because I see some kids as well. I'm kind of expanding. But even with the kiddos, it's challenging. It's really, really challenging, because here they want a certain level of safety and confidentiality to talk with, but if they're in the living room, they have mom and dad there, they're going to hold back a little bit from what they say, as opposed to being able to come in my office, right? Of course, there are limits of confidentiality. There's that clear communication with the parents, beforehand, with the kid beforehand, but even then, it's the fact of having that physical safe space. So I feel like when they don't have that, that can cause some issues. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complex parts. I think from the outsider's perspective, it's easy to say, oh, your therapist must be nice right now. And it's like, oh, you do it, there's a lot of moving pieces. So, sorry guys, I feel like I'm blabbing, but yeah, that's my input.
You're good. You're good. Any questions, Karlie, before I go in?
Well, I had that same thought about like the working, because when I realized that I would be working from home, I was like, where the heck am I going to have my office? Because I don't have like a spare, I rent out my spare bedroom. And I was like, oh, I could do it in my bedroom, but I refuse to do it in my bedroom, because I'm like, no, like my bedroom is like my space. And even if it's like in a little corner, like I don't want to interrupt that. Like I do my podcast in my bedroom, like, but I have a desk set up in my living room, like in the corner, because I'm like, I need to have that separation. I can't wake up, then just walk 2 feet, work, and then 2 feet, and I go like, no, I need some separation. So I totally understand that point.
All right. Now to the good stuff. Just kidding. It's all been good. Emily, you're like, what are you going to say? So I want to kind of switch gears. We've talked more of like a professional clinical perspective, but a couple episodes ago, I talked about my experience with burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, those kinds of things, and how I'm trying to take care of myself, because we hold space as therapists for our clients. And we're also going through a pandemic. Jessica, you moved across country in the middle of the pandemic. Emily, you guys had all of these transitions and changes in your life during the pandemic. And so how do you guys take care of yourselves? And how do you notice, like, if you are getting a little too overwhelmed, or, Jessica, when working with the kids, that's a really, it can be very intense population, especially if you're having an 8-year-old sitting in your office telling you that they're having suicidal ideations. That's a lot. And so how are you guys kind of separating that and taking care of yourselves?
Go ahead, Em.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I don't mind sharing that too. So what Shamina is alluding to, guys, is in the middle of a pandemic, my husband, I thought that'd be a great time to buy a house, which it actually was. Good for us. And then who would have thought, right? And then we also decided to get pregnant and have a child. So all in a pandemic. So yay, right? So a lot of moving pieces there. And yeah, compassion fatigue is definitely a big one, especially with, I'm glad, Jess, that you alluded to that too, about the increase in suicide, because absolutely a lot of increase in suicide and even deaths from COVID. I do a lot of, I do a lot of work with grief and seeing, these spouses left behind, or these kids left behind, and talking about COVID and how that, impacted them. That's really, I mean, that hits home. I mean, that's pretty significant. So like having to separate that, and almost like having a mantra of like, I'm here to help them heal. I'm not here to, absorb everything. I'm not a sponge, right? And I think that's just what it is about having the healthy boundaries in some ways, right? Like having like a little bit of a wall to not take every single thing in, but not to like box out our clients too, because, that's why I talk about with my clients that have these really, really thick, talk about super defense mechanisms up from trauma or whatever it may be. And it's not about bulldozing the wall, because if we don't have that wall, then there's nothing to protect us at all. And like, we need a certain level of protection. Otherwise people are going to be coming in that might not be healthy for us. But like, even as a therapist, I think that's important to exercise too. So like, for me, I'm very, very conscientious about that. I have I do EMDR too. So I have a lot of very, very traumatic stuff that I hear almost on a daily basis. And for me, it's just even between, because I have about 10-minute gaps between, we're not like on to the next, on the next. So when I'm doing the notes and conceptualizing like what I just heard, just being able to separate that, telling myself like, this isn't my trauma. This isn't my trauma. This isn't my trauma. I think that that's helpful, meditation, some deep breathing. And sometimes even before I see another client, I had one recently that was pretty manic. The trauma doesn't really, I don't really feel as much as I do like people that are like truly, because I deal with like a lot of bipolar disorder stuff, and but like that high intensity, like just that manic, and you feel that, you really pick that up, and it's hard to kind of unwind. But that's where I will take like a good 5 minutes where there's some individuals I really like, and I'll just listen to them on YouTube or Headspace or whatever it may be, and I have to center myself, because if I feel the energy and I go in my next session, I'm gonna take that with me. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, to do, but I think that's just the most thing. Trying to be mindful and even have that healthy separation of like going home, and it's like, yeah, I'm a therapist, but at the same time, it's like, I'm also a mom, I'm also a wife, like I'm also Emily, like I'm who I am. So like, where are other things that I enjoy in addition to that? I think everyone just having a little bit of, that self-care. So good question.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica. Oh, we can't hear you. Wait. Can anybody else hear Jessica?
No.
We can't hear you.
Now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was saying that this is something that I work a lot with the parents of the kids too, about self-care and how we as a society think self-care, not that it doesn't, but I think we think that self-care is like bubble baths and like going to get your nails done, right? And for me, it's like so much. I mean, that can be included in it, right? But for me, it's so much more. Like making sure that I go to bed on time, having appropriate boundaries. I think that's something that I learned a lot with my previous job, where I did in-home therapy, and I texted my clients like that was required. I don't do any of that shit now. They can call the office if they'd like. I have clinicians that I work with that do text them on like their Google Voice number. I don't do that. They can email me or they can call the office during our work hours. I think the mix of adults with kids is also helpful, right? I don't see like kid after kid after kid, or sometimes they have young kids, and then I have like teens, right, who I can just do regular like talk therapy with instead of like play techniques. So that's really helpful in maybe the burnout that I get with the kids. I also just really love working with the kids. Like I love play techniques. I think that if anything, that energizes me. It doesn't make me feel burnt out. I think what makes me feel burnt out is the work with the parents. I love it. Like that's one of the things that I love working with kids. I love doing like parental strategies and going over like gentle parenting or no drama discipline parenting with the parents. I love that education piece of it. It's the parents that don't put in the work that they need to, and they just think that their kid is the only moving gear or the only gear that needs to move or change. That's what can get frustrating. And I think it's all a practice. I think that you get better at it with time. I think I'm way better at it than I ever was when I first began, right? But you still have those moments where you have to, recognize that you're working a lot harder than them and take a step back. I think talking with other people is helpful with that too. Like my husband or my friends or other coworkers.
So what do you do outside of the office to help? You mentioned like going to bed on time, like having those work boundaries, but what else do you do to take care of yourself?
Hiking. It's really beautiful out here in Nevada. It's really beautiful. We go hiking at least once a week. We usually go on the weekends. I just got back home from a hike, a really pretty one. Yeah, if it's not the summertime, if it's not like the 3 months of you're in an oven, the rest of the time is really beautiful. So I think just getting outside the nature here is really nice.
Yeah, I have a client who's traveling to Vegas, and I was like, oh, you should try out the hiking. Like I have a friend who's there, like her and her husband go all the time, and she's like, really, there's hiking there?
Yeah, people don't think of Vegas as hikes, right? But it's insane. Like we lived here for a little over a year and a half, and we still like within like a 3-hour like area from Vegas, we still have not explored everything. It's pretty insane, and it makes me not really want to move back to Florida because I there.
Don't blame you. They don't blame you. I think what you had said about the boundaries is like super, super important for us as therapists. And, you know, Karlie, you and I were just talking, you're like, you don't call me anymore, or, you know, this or that. And I feel really bad sometimes. But I can't. I don't have the ability to talk to other people, because not that I don't want to listen to you or I don't want to be there for you, but it's like I have to listen and be so attentive for hours on end that I can't. Sometimes I can't even listen to my partner. You know, he'll come home from work and he wants to talk about his day, and I know that I'm not paying attention. I'm just like, please stop talking. And sometimes I'll tell him, like, when I've had enough, I'm like, I just can't do this right now. Like, I've had enough. And I think that's been a really big challenge for me, is because sometimes, you know, I work from home. I live so much farther than anybody of my friends. You know, I have to travel at least an hour to go see anybody. And that is a really big challenge of like trying to maintain those friendships and relationships, because I don't see them on a daily basis. I'm not in an office seeing people. And then being a full-time therapist, I'm tired. And I want to have those connections, but it's like, I can't listen to anybody, or I can't just be present, you know, with my friends in my life until I like mentally prepare to do that and to be there with them. So don't take it personally.
I take it so personal all the time. I just want to comment that I think it's so relaxing talking to you guys, because you're like so calm and gentle when you talk, and you're all very validating of like Emily every time she's like, that's a very good question, and I'm like, I don't ever say that. Like, I may think it's a good question, but I don't like you just all like, I just think it's really funny, like you're all just very calm and like soothing as you're talking, and I'm just like,
What did you say, Jess?
We've had a lot of practice.
Yes, we have had a lot of practice.
Yeah, I think it's like, Jess, you're just so calm. You're just like so yeah, just very, you know, like just very level. Like, okay, yeah, yep, that's what I like. And I'm like, that is so nice. That's so soothing and like very calm. Like, I would have you as my therapist. Just kidding. I have one though, but I love it. I love listening to you guys talk, and I think it's very. You're obviously saying very nice things, but I'm noticing the tone too, and I think that's important as well. Like, not only what you're saying, but how you're saying it, and the fact that like I'm able to acknowledge like, I really like how you're speaking. Like, it's a good quality.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of practice, like they said. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I mean, Shamina, Jess, but I mean, goes back to like, it was like counseling 101. I mean, foundations of counseling. And the first activity you have to do is like, you have to talk for like 5 minutes with, you know, someone acts as a client, you act as a therapist. You have like one of these professors that like come on in and want to see how things are going. But at the time you're like, I have no idea what the hell I'm going to talk about. And there were even some groups, what we did is we would cheat and we would put all the stuff we had to talk about on the board. So we'd run through it. And then when it's like, oh shit, we have 4 minutes left. So, I mean, it's about like finding that time. And now when I have like these 2-hour intakes for couples, because I see couples too, you know, I think at first there was that like initial, like, oh my God, like what in the hell are we going to talk about for 2 hours? But you know, over time, it happens so organically. And talk about just using that toolkit. I mean, there's a reason, you know, my husband gives me a hard time all the time. He's always like, you know, he knows it's actually a hard job, but he's like, it's so easy just to talk to people all day because he's extroverted. I'm like, you have no idea. I'm like, you have no idea. I'm like, if you sat inside with someone, they opened up about trauma, like, what are you going to do with that? I mean, it's just amazing. You know, I'm very grateful. You know, I joke with him all the time, like, there's a reason, you know, I don't know about you guys, there's a reason why I have some really nice student loans, you know, in addition to grad school, because without that and the experience, there's no way I could be a therapist. So, but yeah, no, you all are really well spoken, and I really appreciate you guys having us on.
Well, I think, sorry, Jess, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Emily, that reminded me of how sometimes I just sit back and reflect on grad school, right? And how nerve-wracking it was just to talk for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have 45-minute to an hour sessions. I'm like, it's not enough time. I need more time. It's just funny. It's funny to sit back and reflect on that and see how much like you've grown personally.
Yeah, it is weird. You know, we had to like do certain skills in like those 5 minutes. Like, oh, you have to like give a summary, or you have to give an empathic
Paraphrase.
Yeah, or like I can't do that, or you know, it sounds like so rehearsed, and you can tell like we're thinking. Like we watch the videos, and it's like you're thinking about what you want to say. Yep. And then now it's like, oh, it just comes out so naturally. And my clients are like, oh, Shamina, you know, you're so great. Or I have this one client who says, they're like, I don't know what you're doing, this like magic that's like happening. And I was like, it is not magic. I was like, it is science. And it is just, I care. It's science and I care. And so it comes across that way. But it is so funny just to kind of reflect of like how far we've come as therapists, but even as people, and, you know, kind of maintaining these connections throughout the years. I mean, it's been 3 years since we've graduated. It's been 6 years since we started our program.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. It'll be 6 years this fall. That's insane. That's just insane.
That is insane.
Well,
I like to think back, and I think that the 6 year ago Jess would be very proud of the now Jess.
Yeah, I
definitely.
wholeheartedly agree. What were you gonna say, Karlie?
I just said definitely.
What were you gonna say earlier though? Earlier when both
well, I feel like time has passed. I was going to say Emily made a comment of like, you know, like, oh, how your husband will joke with you. And I mean, granted, I went to social work school. I went to grad school for social work, but it's so like, I think it's funny because I think a lot of people do have that perception, but like, it's not like just chilling talking. It's like, I'm about to unload on you all of my like darkest like moments and thoughts. And so it's not just like, Shamina, what are you doing today? Oh, what are you about? Oh, is that what you're going to do later? You're going to go shopping? No, it's like, I just am really not happy right now. And like, so it's like, it's hell. I don't know how many times I have to say this until I get it in my brain, even though I know, but like, I could never be a therapist ever, because I know what the heck y'all got to deal with. I'd be bawling before my client was. I would just be like, oh my God, why do you have to deal with that? And like, I don't know how you guys keep it together. I don't know how you guys do what you do. I give a big salute to every therapist, because that just seems like a really freaking hard job.
Bite your tongue. That's helpful. My rule of thumb is you cannot cry more than them, right? So only I shed a few tears, and I feel fine with that. Right? It's hard though. It's just like with anything. It's a skill. It just takes practice. That's all it is.
Yeah. It does, but I also think there are days where it weighs heavier on us than we'd like to admit, or we do take it home, and it is hard to have that separation because we're human beings at the end of the day. You know, we're not like these robots who can kind of perform. And, you know, my clients tell me this a lot. They're like, Shamina, you know, I think you're really good at your job, but you also have to care, right? You know, there's part of you that like cares. And I'm like, absolutely, because I wouldn't be a good therapist if I genuinely didn't care about you as a person. Like, yes, it's my job. You pay me for this service, but I care. I may think of you when something reminds me of you, or, you know, something happens and I'm like, oh, you know, so-and-so would really enjoy this, or what have you. Like, there is that personal connection. And sometimes that's really hard to turn off, because we are people and we do form emotional connections to our clients. It's not just a paycheck for us. And that, I think with the pandemic, that's almost been more challenging, because you're sitting in front of somebody holding space for them, and they're telling you exactly something that you may be going through or that you're feeling. and you have to be objective about it, and being able to attend to what their needs are and not your own stuff, and kind of pocketing that and then revisiting it later. But it can be so challenging, trying to help somebody through these issues in a pandemic that you're also experiencing, because we're people and nobody taught us how to be in a pandemic or be therapists in a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard with the kiddos. There's definitely been a lot of times where I'm just like, I just want to take you home. I have a spare room. I got 3 spare rooms. I can take home you and your 2 siblings. Yeah, it's hard with them, especially when a lot of their stuff isn't theirs. It's parents or the guardians or the foster parents or whomever.
Yeah, I think that's sorry. I think that that hits home. I think that's really valid too. Because I mean, granted, my daughter's 13 months old. It's just it is. I see these like new moms coming in that like struggle with postpartum or struggle with some of these things, and they'll have 6-month-olds, they'll have 7-month-olds, and it really makes you think. I mean, it makes me reflect back and like, oh my gosh, like. I remember these nursing issues. I remember the sleep that's, I mean, all these things to juggle. And in some ways it's like, yeah, I do have to remind myself I have to be objective. I can't like, just share based on my own personal experience. It's like I'm sharing from what research says, what all this other accumulated knowledge that I have, but like including that too. So yeah, that is definitely, I think, the biggest struggle for me for like new moms or people just trying to find like what that balance is like, because part of me is like, oh, do you have some wisdom? Can you let me know what that balance is like? Because Shamina even alluded to it earlier that like, yeah, I think it's so easy to personalize when, we do have a lot of just time apart from, socialization and just interacting with our friends, pre-COVID, but like now it has changed it, especially in the role as a therapist. So like, for me, it's like, yeah, I mean, I designate a certain amount of time for my daughter, for my husband, and then carve out some time for me. But like, at the end of the day, I want to read a book. I have a goal of how many books I want to read this year. That's already out the window. But even then, like, oh, maybe I could play a video game, right? Like maybe I can do this. By the end of the night, I get home, I make dinner, I hang out with my baby, she goes to bed, and then I'm like, okay, deuces, I'm going to bed now. Like you were saying, Jess, having that sleep. It's like I do get really mentally burnt out. So like, I think that's still kind of ongoing for me too, being a newer therapist, to finding out what that looks like in the private practice. So ongoing.
I have a question for you, Emily. You do you think that being a new mom, being in that role has helped you connect with your clients who are in that same role? Or do you feel like it adds another layer of challenge to it?
No, I think no, absolutely. I think more of the connection piece of like, oh, okay. And even like my parents that come in, because like I guess I really am broadening and seeing a lot more kiddos and a lot more younger teens now. And they never come out and ask me, but it's like you could feel them kind of testing, they're asking without asking if you have kids. But they'll even ask like, so what's your experience with kids? And I'll say, oh, I have a kid, she's 1. And most of the time it's always like, oh, that's so cute. But it's like, oh, okay. I do feel like there is this level of being able to connect though a little bit more, because I don't think you have to be a parent in order to be a good, whatever therapist for kids or anything like that. But yeah, I think it helps me connect a little bit more with the parents too. And then like, because I don't mind, I have a little bit more self-disclosure with some of my kiddos, because it just helps them. I feel like, you feel safer, connect some of my teens too. So like I'll tell them that, I listened to Linkin Park, and that was like before they came out, and they're like, oh, cool, my parents listen to Linkin Park. That's classic. And it's like, oh, yikes. But even then, right? Like, yeah, it's like, oh, right in there. But even then, it is really cool. Like I had a kid that had a hard time kind of opening up with me at first. And he struggles with like some gaming addiction things, but it's like certain games that elicit that anger thing. So I joked with him about what gaming console he thought, was my first one. And when I told him it was the Super Nintendo, his eyes were literally like, what? So, I mean, I think it is helpful though, because there's a different layer to help connect. So, there's a lot there.
I always thought that would be a challenge with me, not having kids and working mainly with kids. I've only had one, and she's an adult who is my client. I'm not even working with her children. But she asked me if I had kids, and I said no. Right, we quickly moved on. I don't know if maybe they just assume, right? The parents that I work with just like assume. But a lot of the times I like refer when I'm like teaching, right? I refer to like parents as we, like I like include myself in on that. And I think that helps them connect with me that way. I don't know. I thought that would always be a challenge for me. Like, well, you don't even know because you don't have kids, right? But I found that I don't really get that much, if at all.
Yeah. I think I've only been challenged on that a couple of times. And
Right.
I remember I was like berated, like, you don't have kids, you don't know what this is like, you don't know what you're talking about. And it was a really challenging case. So I was just like, you can get out of my office if you're gonna keep doing this. But I even remember my brother, he was about to have a baby at the time, and I was starting to work with kids, and he's like, Shamina, what do you possibly know about working with kids? You don't even have kids. Like, you're gonna teach me things to do with my daughter? And I was like, you bet your ass I am, because I have knowledge. I have this other skill set. I don't need kids. And I think, they talk about that a lot in grad school, is that we don't need to be in the exact position or circumstance as our clients in order to empathize or help them through these things, because it's the emotion that matters. It's not the circumstance. Yes, it helps if we've experienced that or we're going through the same thing. But if that were the case, nobody would have clients, or you would only have clients in the life stage that you were at. But I think that's what makes us as therapists so effective, is that we can still find ways to connect, or what we're talking about makes sense to people and is valid, despite the fact that we may not have kids, or we're not married, or we haven't gone through these experiences. We can still help, and I think that instills hope.
Well said.
All right, any last questions, concerns, or comments? Karlie, say that 5 times.
Why Karlie? What if they have questions or comments?
I'll get to them, but I told them, I was like, Karlie's gonna come with the questions. You're letting me down today, girl.
I'm being an active listener today, and I think that you guys have a lot of knowledge, and since I did not pursue this therapy social work route, I will just absorb the knowledge, in case one day ever Shamina asks me what we said on this podcast, I can remind her, because it won't be me becoming a therapist. But no, I think this was a very enlightening, and I liked hearing about, like, Jess, I didn't know you worked with kids. I think that's so awesome. Like, I have a friend who she, I guess does like play therapy. And I haven't had a lot of conversations with her, but she has like a playroom, and she showed me her playroom of like all of like the toys. And I think that's really awesome. I didn't know you worked with kids. I think that's super cool. Emily, I've learned things about you, and well, I knew you, but your therapy. So I think it's awesome. I don't know. I just like hearing like different types, because I think we forget all of the like reasons people go to therapy, and like, I'm thinking like a 2-year-old needing therapy, but like it happens, like they, through their experiences, whatever, it's needed. And I think it's so awesome that there are parents out there who put their kids in, because that is like, to me, I think, most people would, I don't want to say most people, but there are people out there who their parents would be like, my 2-year-old doesn't need therapy, or my 8-year-old doesn't need therapy. And the fact that there are parents out there that are like, I need to help my kid, even if they're 2, I would rather it start sooner than them being 30 and not knowing, what the heck. So I think it's amazing.
The intervention is key.
Yeah.
It is because, even us as people, like, we're not a therapist because we had this wonderful, amazing, happy life. I have yet to meet a therapist who has like this golden life.
I guess
And
it didn't
so-
last very long.
Yes. And could you imagine if when we were younger and we were going through these experiences, we went to therapy or our parents put us in therapy or recognized like, hey, you may have anxiety when you're older. You may have this when you're older. You're going to have PTSD. And we had these early interventions. That creates resiliency. That creates the adaptiveness that we need, which hopefully with this new generation, we'll see some of those changes occurring because there is such accessibility now. The stigma is still there, but it's being reduced. I think with this new generation, Gen Z, they are very open and, excuse me, transparent. They're like, yeah, my therapist or this, or, I'm in therapy, or, oh, I told my friend that I gotta leave so I can go see my therapist. It's not a point of shame. And I think the parents are also starting to get on board that this is something that is helpful and not something that we have to keep hiding or shying away from.
Absolutely. If I ever birth a child, when I get them a pediatrician, I will also sign them up with a therapist so that they're just ready, golden, good to go. But I agree with Shamina of like, because like for me, when I'm in therapy, like if I go to my parents or something, I'll be like, oh yeah, I have therapy on Monday. And I think like it definitely has normalized it, because I think before my dad would be like, you're going to a therapist? Like, my dad doesn't talk like that, but you know what I mean? Like,
That was bad.
I did you bad, Dad. I did you bad. No, but you know what I mean? It's just like, whoa, you go to therapy, but now it's just like, oh, okay, she has her therapy appointment. People are gonna think my dad's like super contrary. I know, that's not him at all. Oh gosh. I'm embarrassed for him right now. If you can see me red, I cannot believe I just did him like that. Anyways, Shamina, take over.
All right. So Emily and Jess, do you guys have any questions, comments, questions for us? Just, this is the first time you guys have been on the podcast.
Yes.
Oh, I like it. You guys did a really good job. I think that I commend both of you guys for continuing to stick up with something like this, right? I'm thinking of the time and effort that you have to put into it, and connecting with people, finding people, thinking of what you want to talk about. Kudos to both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I echo what Jess says, kind of laughing about just like the time and energy. Like it's like, as much as I love talking about, emotions and thoughts and behaviors, I'm like, man, that's a lot of time to dedicate. So like, kudos to you. It shows how passionate you guys really are about that. And I think that that's wonderful to have that platform and to normalize it. I think the last, concluding idea that I could think of that you guys started to talk about was just even the normalization with Gen Zers, millennials about therapy, because before, like, you didn't talk about that, like what's therapy, like you kept that hidden, and now in some ways it's trendy actually to talk about therapy. So I actually have had some clients I've referred out, or I've even talked to parents and say, yeah, like, never to minimize anyone's problems, but this person's actually trying out therapy, the 16-year-old, because her friends are doing therapy, and like there's literally no issues, no grief, no trauma. Like the girl's literally laughing and saying, yeah, I just thought it'd be cool because my friends do it. So it was like, okay, there it is, right? So because it's just like, so what's going on? Talking about like golden life, like, well, nothing. I do this, and this. It's like, there's nothing. It's like, no, I just thought it'd be cool. So I mean, in some ways it's good, but on other hand, in other ways it's just like being mindful of that, of like, okay, so why are you really in here, so anyway, yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys having us on here. So it's really good to catch up with everyone, and thank you.
Definitely. And I think that point's so funny of, like trying therapy just because your friends are, and I think it also shows how much like teens are receptive to having another adult be a safe space for them. And I think that's the biggest thing working with kids and teens in general, is that we model for them what having a safe adult looks like. We model what a healthy relationship looks like. And I tell that to my clients all the time. I'm like, they're like, Shamina, I can't be in a good relationship. All my relationships have been bad and unhealthy. And I tell them, I'm like, what a healthy relationship looks like, because we have one. This is one. And so what are components that you like, and how can you kind of translate it into different areas? And I think that's so funny that you had somebody who was like,
They had
"Oh, I
someone
just
straight
had
up.
it because my friends did."
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So thank you both for coming on. It is a pleasure seeing both of you. I love you both. I miss you both. I'm glad that you are doing well and staying healthy and safe, professionally and personally. So we will have you back on, I assure you, in one capacity or another.
Yeah, thank you guys for being a guest. I loved hearing y'all's views, stories, comments. Loved it.
Yes. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, viewers.
Bye.
All right.
All right.
Are you feeling full? Because I am feeling emotionally full and charged and energized. I have been excited for this episode, everyone, for weeks. I was like, Karlie, we're doing this. She's like, okay, great. I've been coordinating. I've been hyping them up. I'm like, it's gonna be great. We're gonna have so much fun. And I love them. They, like I said, we met in graduate school and have maintained these relationships ever since, and it's been such a gift to see both of them grow personally and professionally, and to continue to have them both in my life. So I'm super stoked that they would be able to be on. And now this is like my self-care for today. I was like, I can't wait for this episode.
I know. And I know on Friday I was talking to Shamina about how I possibly an old friend had invited me out somewhere, and Shamina's like, you have the podcast recording, and I was like, you right, girl. But yeah, she has definitely been super stoked for this, and I enjoyed it. I think it was a great conversation. I think I don't know, I feel like I didn't have a lot of questions because I was just absorbing it all in and just kind of like soaking it in and listening and hearing all that. But I think both of what they've worked, like populations they've worked with, is very intriguing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you and I like switched roles today. You were like the empathic like listener, like yeah, and I was like, all right, this.
Oh my god. We definitely have switched roles right now, but don't worry, next week it'll be right back to the same. But yes. Oh goodness, look at Shamina waving her hands in the air like she just don't care. Okay, so
all right, what would be a good question? Oh, I know. Oh wait, okay. You got one?
No.
Okay. Tell us if you've ever been in therapy or are currently in therapy. What has been your experience? What do you like about your therapist? If you feel comfortable talking about those things, we want to know, because we want to normalize going to therapy. Obviously, I'm a therapist and we do this podcast, and that's part of the reason why we do this podcast, is to normalize these emotions and things that we feel. So let us know your experience, or even, are you thinking about going to therapy but have reservations? What are those reservations?
Do you go to therapy for fun, or no, I'm kidding? Because Emily's
do it, or because you got problems that you're trying to work through.
Right? No, but real quick before we wrap up, I did see this TikTok video of this girl who on her Hinge, because you can write or you can say things now. She was like, if you have never voluntarily went to therapy, swipe left. And I was like, anyways.
All right. We will see you all next week. Same time, same place. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.